The first time my stepfather publicly called me a liar, the entire courthouse went silent so fast it felt like the air itself had frozen. "That woman is not family," he barked, pointing straight at me from across the courtroom. "She built her whole life on lies." His voice echoed against the oak-paneled walls hard enough to make people turn in their seats. Even the court clerk stopped typing for a second. I remember every detail of that moment. The bitter smell of burnt coffee drifting from the hallway outside. The wet December snow melting into the courthouse carpets. The weight of my military dress coat pressing against my shoulders. And the way strangers looked at me after his accusation, like they were trying to decide whether I was a criminal or a victim. But none of that compared to the feeling of hearing him say those words. Because for 29 years, I had spent my entire life trying to prove I belonged in that family. And in less than 10 seconds, Warren Holloway erased me. My name is Savannah Vale. At the time all this happened, I was a lieutenant commander attached to a classified federal operations unit under the Department of Defense. Most people thought I worked logistics overseas. That lie kept people safe, including me. But before any of that, before the deployments, before the medals, before federal investigators and courtroom scandals, I was just a girl from a dying steel town in Pennsylvania trying to survive a house where love always came with conditions. I grew up in Ashridge. Small town. Cold winters. Rusted factories. The kind of place where everybody knows your business before you do. My mother, Diane, worked double shifts at Mercy General Hospital for most of my childhood. She had tired eyes and the gentlest hands I've ever known. My stepfather Warren was different. He carried himself like a man who believed the world owed him obedience. Former sheriff's deputy. Ex-high school football hero. The kind of man who still talked about things he did 20 years ago like they happened yesterday. People respected him because he was loud enough to confuse confidence with authority. At home, though, he was something else entirely. He never hit me. That's the part that confused people later. No bruises. No police reports. No broken bones. Just years of small humiliation stacked so high they eventually became a prison. You're too emotional. You think too much. No man wants a woman smarter than him. Girls like you end up alone. Those were his favorite kinds of sentences. Tiny cuts. Daily cuts. The kind that leave scars nobody else can see. My younger stepbrother, Cole, could do no wrong. When he got suspended for fighting, Warren laughed about it over dinner. "Boys got fire," he said proudly. When I came home with a statewide academic scholarship at 16, Warren barely looked up from the television. Book smarts don't make people useful. I remember standing there in the kitchen holding the letter with shaking hands while my mother tried to smile enough for both of them. That was the first night I realized something painful. No achievement of mine would ever threaten the version of me Warren had already decided to believe in. Weak. Temporary. Forgettable. But pain does strange things to people. Some people collapse under it. Others sharpen. By 18, I knew exactly two things. If I stayed in Ashridge, I would suffocate. And if I wanted respect, I'd have to earn it somewhere men like Warren couldn't control. So, I enlisted. The night I told them, thunder rattled the windows outside while rain slammed against the roof hard enough to shake the house. My mother looked terrified. Warren laughed. Actually laughed. "You," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Military?" I kept my voice steady. "Yes." He took a slow sip of beer. "You won't last 6 months." Cole snorted beside him. "She cries during allergy commercials," he muttered. My mother snapped at him immediately, but I barely heard her. Because Warren kept staring at me with that same cold amusement. "You're running away," he said. "No," I answered quietly. "I'm escaping." That shut him up. For a moment. Then his expression changed. And I swear to God, even now, after everything that happened later, I still remember the hatred in his eyes that night. Not anger. Not disappointment. Hatred. Because men like Warren don't mind weak women. Weak women make them feel powerful. What they cannot tolerate are women who leave. Boot camp nearly killed me. Not physically. Mentally. The exhaustion was constant. 3 hours of sleep. Blisters bleeding through socks. Drill instructors screaming inches from your face while freezing rain soaked your uniform. I watched grown men quit before sunrise. But every time I thought about giving up, I heard Warren's voice. You won't last. And suddenly quitting became impossible. Pain became fuel. That's the dangerous thing about surviving emotionally abusive people. Eventually, suffering starts feeling normal. During field exercises in Colorado, one of my commanding officers asked how I stayed calm under pressure. I almost laughed, because after surviving Warren Holloway, a screaming sergeant felt easy. Years passed, then more years. Afghanistan, Germany, Turkey, Jordan. Assignments blurred together into airports, encrypted briefings, and long stretches of silence I legally couldn't explain to anyone. Meanwhile, back home, Cole spiraled. Drugs, debt, bar fights, 2 DUIs before 30. And every single time he self-destructed, Warren rescued him. That's my boy, he'd say proudly. Meanwhile, I missed holidays serving overseas while getting criticized for abandoning family. The hypocrisy stopped surprising me eventually. Still, my mother always called. Every birthday, every deployment, every Christmas morning, no matter what time zone I was in. Sometimes she'd whisper into the phone late at night after Warren went to sleep. I'm proud of you, Save. Those 4 words kept me alive more times than she ever knew. Then she got sick. Stage 4 ovarian cancer. Aggressive, fast, merciless. I flew home immediately after the diagnosis. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee and fear. Machines beeped softly in dark rooms while families spoke in whispers nobody believed. My mother looked smaller every day, like illness was slowly erasing her from the world piece by piece. I stayed beside her constantly, fed her ice chips, helped nurses adjust blankets, read aloud when she was too tired to hold books herself. Warren barely visited, and when he did, he acted inconvenienced by her suffering. One night around 2 a.m., I found him standing outside her hospital room staring through the glass. You always had to make yourself the hero, he said quietly without looking at me. I thought I misheard him. What? He finally turned toward me. She spent your whole life choosing you over this family. The exhaustion inside me instantly became rage. She's dying. And somehow, he interrupted coldly. You still make everything about yourself. I stepped toward him before I could stop myself. Years of swallowed anger rushed upward all at once. But before I said anything, my mother's weak voice drifted from inside the room. Please. We both froze. She was awake, and the look in her eyes that night wasn't fear of me. It was fear of what this family had become. 2 weeks later, she died holding my hand. And the last thing she ever whispered to me was, don't let him destroy your heart too. The morning of my mother's funeral, Ashridge looked like the entire town had been dipped in ash. Gray sky, dead trees, cold rain sliding down church windows. Even the air smelled heavy. I stood alone in the front hallway of the funeral home staring at my reflection in a black dress uniform, trying to prepare myself for the next few hours. But grief doesn't prepare you for anything. It just makes your body feel unfamiliar, like your soul left temporarily and forgot to tell you. Behind me, people whispered in low voices while folding chairs scraped against polished floors. Somewhere nearby, an organ played softly enough to sound ghost-like. My mother loved quiet music. I kept thinking about that. Tiny details suddenly mattered more after death. The way she stirred coffee with her left hand. The lavender lotion she wore before bed. The way she always touched my cheek when she knew I was hurting. Gone. Just gone. And somehow the world kept moving anyway. I hated that. You look tired. I turned. Warren stood near the doorway adjusting his tie like this was some political event instead of his wife's funeral. His expression was dry, controlled, not grieving, managing. I buried my mother 3 days ago, I answered flatly. He shrugged. Well, try not to look miserable in front of people. For a second, I genuinely thought I might hit him. But years in the military teach you discipline even when your blood is boiling. So instead, I stared at him. Really stared. And for the first time in my life, I noticed something strange. He looked older. Not physically. Smaller somehow. Like without my mother softening the edges of his personality, people could finally see exactly what he was. The service itself felt unreal. People cried, shared stories, praised her kindness. Nurses from Mercy General talked about how she stayed late with dying patients, even off the clock. An elderly woman hugged me afterward and whispered, "Your mother talked about you constantly." That nearly broke me, because Warren never talked about me unless criticism was involved. But my mother? Apparently, she carried photos of me everywhere. In her purse, at work, inside her locker at the hospital. There were pictures of me in uniform I'd never even seen before. And suddenly, I realized something devastating. My mother spent years loving me loudly in places Warren couldn't hear. After the burial, everyone gathered in the church basement for food. Small-town funerals always work like that. Ham sandwiches, cheap coffee, paper plates, forced smiles hiding real pain. I escaped outside before the crowd overwhelmed me. Rain drizzled softly across the cemetery, while mud soaked through the edges of my shoes. That's where Warren found me. He lit a cigarette beneath the church awning and stood beside me in silence for several seconds. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. "You embarrass me today." I slowly turned toward him. "What? You wearing that uniform like you're some kind of war hero?" I actually laughed once because the cruelty sounded insane even for him. "My mother was buried an hour ago. And somehow," he muttered, "you still found a way to make it about yourself." The rain intensified around us. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat now. "You know what your problem is?" he continued. "You left this family behind and expected applause for it. I served my country. You abandoned your mother." That one hit hard, because guilt already lived inside me every day. The missed birthdays, the deployments, the years overseas. People in service carry invisible grief constantly. The feeling that while you were busy saving strangers, you failed the people you loved. And Warren knew exactly where to stab. "You think medals make you honorable?" he asked quietly. "You don't know anything about honor." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Rainwater dripped from the church gutters behind us, while wind moved through rows of gravestones. Then he looked directly at me and said, "You stopped being family the second you chose that uniform over us." Something inside me went completely numb. Not shattered, not broken, just numb. Because deep down, I think I finally understood the truth. Nothing I ever did would have changed how he saw me. Not success, not sacrifice, not loyalty. Men like Warren only love people they can control. And I stopped being controllable years ago. He flicked his cigarette into the wet grass and walked away without another word. Just like that. As if he had spent 29 years slowly poisoning every good memory attached to my childhood. I left Ashridge the next morning before sunrise. Snow drifted across empty highways while old country songs played softly through the car speakers. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to cry. Mostly, I just felt exhausted. Back in Arlington, life resumed immediately. That's another ugly truth nobody tells civilians about military life. The world does not pause for your grief. 3 days after burying my mother, I was back inside a secure briefing room reviewing overseas intelligence reports under fluorescent lights. Nobody there knew I hadn't slept properly in weeks. Nobody knew I still reached for my phone sometimes before remembering she was gone. I buried everything the way military people do. Quietly, efficiently, until the lawsuit arrived. It showed up on a Thursday afternoon during freezing rain. I remember because the weather matched exactly how I felt when I opened the envelope. Cold, heavy, wrong. At first I thought it was paperwork connected to my mother's estate. Then I started reading, and the room began spinning. Warren Holloway was suing me for nearly everything. My mother's savings, her house, insurance policies, personal property. But none of that compared to the final page. Claim filed under disputed biological relation. I reread the sentence 4 times. Then a 5th. My hand started shaking so badly the papers slipped onto the kitchen floor. He wasn't just contesting the will. He was claiming I was never legally family, meaning everything my mother left me could become invalid. I sat at the kitchen table for nearly an hour staring at the documents while rain streaked the windows beside me. My stepfather had waited until she died to erase me. Around midnight, I finally called Cole. I don't know why. Maybe some stupid wounded part of me still hoped there was a line, even they wouldn't cross. He answered, sounding drunk. What? You knew about this? Silence. Then a long sigh. Save, just let it go. I felt physically sick. You knew. Warren deserves the house. The house my mother paid for? She was his wife, and I was her daughter. Cole laughed bitterly. Yeah, her favorite daughter. The resentment in his voice shocked me. You seriously think this is okay? You were never here, he snapped suddenly. You disappeared for years, then came home acting like some decorated savior. I was deployed. You always have an excuse. I closed my eyes. Some people resent sacrifice because it reminds them of their own failures. Cole had spent most of his adult life self-destructing while other people cleaned up the damage. And now my mother was gone, meaning nobody remained to protect him from consequences anymore. You gambled away your life, I said quietly. And now you want hers too. His breathing changed instantly. Then came the sentence that finally made everything clear. You think you're better than us because the government gave you medals. No. I thought. You hate me because deep down, you know I earned them. He hung up without another word. I sat there alone in my kitchen listening to the dead silence afterward while thunder rolled across the Virginia sky. Then my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Lieutenant Commander Savannah Vale? Yes. This is Evelyn Mercer. Her voice sounded older. Sharp. Controlled. I've been reviewing your case. What case? A pause. Then she said quietly. The one your stepfather thinks he can win. Evelyn Mercer's office sat above an old pharmacy in downtown Ashridge. The staircase creaked beneath my boots as I climbed toward a frosted glass door with gold lettering that read, Mercer and Associates, Estate and Federal Litigation. The office smelled like peppermint tea, old paper, and winter dust. Evelyn herself looked somewhere in her late 60s, silver-haired, razor-sharp, dressed like the kind of woman judges listen to carefully. She didn't smile when I walked in. She studied me, then motioned toward the chair across from her desk. You look exhausted, she said. My mother died 6 weeks ago. And now your stepfather is trying to bury you beside her. Blunt. I appreciated that immediately. For nearly 2 hours, we reviewed documents while freezing rain rattled the windows outside. Every page made Warren look worse. Suspicious banking activity. Attempts to access county archive records. Property transfers dated before my mother even died. He planned this early, Evelyn muttered. How early? She slid one document toward me. 6 months minimum. My stomach dropped. Meaning while my mother was dying in a hospital bed, Warren was already preparing to steal everything she owned. Evelyn removed her glasses slowly. Your stepfather isn't grieving, she said quietly. He's hunting. Something cold moved through me at those words because, deep down, I already knew she was right. Then she asked the question that changed everything. What exactly did you do overseas? I hesitated automatically. Years of classified work condition your brain permanently. You learn silence so deeply it becomes instinct. Military coordination, I answered carefully. Her expression didn't move. Try again. I looked away toward the rain outside. There are things I legally can't discuss. Savannah, she said softly, if this lawsuit escalates into federal territory, surprises become dangerous. Silence stretched between us. And suddenly a memory surfaced. A sealed black document case. A Pentagon briefing room. A colonel speaking quietly across a steel table years earlier. If your service record is ever publicly challenged, this gets delivered through legal counsel only. At the time, I'd almost laughed. Who would ever challenge my military identity? Now I knew. I swallowed hard. There may be federal verification documents. Evelyn's eyes sharpened instantly. May. I was ordered never to access them unless absolutely necessary. She leaned forward slightly. And is this absolutely necessary? I thought about my mother, her funeral, the headlines already spreading online, the humiliation, the way Warren smiled while trying to erase me from my own family. Yes, I whispered. That evening I drove to a private storage facility outside D.C. Snow drifted softly beneath orange parking lot lights while icy wind sliced through my coat. The storage locker sat near the back row. Cold metal walls, concrete floors, silence. Inside was an old military footlocker covered in deployment stickers and faded transport labels. For several seconds, I just stared at it, because pieces of my real life existed inside that box. The life nobody back home ever understood. I opened it carefully. Inside were old commendations, photographs, uniforms, and beneath everything else, a sealed black case stamped with Department of Defense markings. My pulse instantly accelerated. The seal remained untouched. Dark blue wax, federal insignia, red authorization stripe. Even after years, just looking at it made my chest tighten. I remembered the colonel's exact words that night. Some records protect information, others protect people. At the time, I didn't fully understand what he meant. Now, I was beginning to. Back in Ashridge, the lawsuit exploded across local news within days. Decorated female officer accused in family fraud dispute. People love destroying women publicly, especially successful women, especially military women. By Monday morning, my inbox looked radioactive. Former classmates, reporters, anonymous messages. One email simply read, "Bet your fake medals feel heavy now." I deleted it immediately. But humiliation doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It settles into your body physically, changes how you walk into rooms, how long you hold eye contact. Even at work, I noticed people becoming quieter around me, careful, curious, suspicious. And because parts of my service remained classified, I couldn't fully defend myself. That was the genius of Warren's attack. He understood just enough about secrecy to weaponize it. The preliminary hearing arrived 3 weeks later. Fairfax County Courthouse. Gray skies. Cold rain. News vans lining the street outside. The moment I stepped from Evelyn's car, cameras exploded. "Commander Vale, did you falsify military records? Are federal investigators involved?" Evelyn guided me through the chaos calmly. "Eyes forward," she murmured. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with quiet anticipation. People whispered openly. Everyone sensed something ugly unfolding. Then I saw Warren. Dark suit, perfect posture, cold eyes. Beside him sat Cole, looking pale and nervous. For one stupid moment, I almost walked over there. Not to argue, to beg. Some damaged part of me still wanted Warren to suddenly admit this had gone too far. But when our eyes met, I saw no hesitation, only hunger, like a man preparing to win. The hearing began with procedural arguments. Then Warren's attorney, a polished snake named Daniel Cray, started building his narrative. Manipulative daughter, abandoned family, suspicious military background. At one point, he held up copies of my service file. Significant portions of Commander Vale's alleged accomplishments cannot be independently verified. Alleged. That word hit like a slap. Evelyn remained perfectly calm beside me. Then Cray made a mistake. We believe the defendant exaggerated elements of her military identity for financial gain. Financial gain. As if 20 years of service had been some elaborate inheritance scam. That's when Evelyn stood slowly. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "absence of public records does not equal absence of service." Cray smirked. "Then where are the records?" Evelyn turned toward me. One look. That was all. Now. My heartbeat slammed hard enough to hurt. Slowly, I reached into my briefcase and removed the sealed black federal case. The courtroom immediately changed. People leaned forward. Even the judge sat straighter. "What exactly is that?" Cray asked nervously. Evelyn ignored him. "Your Honor," she said carefully, "the defense requests permission to submit federally protected verification documents regarding Commander Savannah Vale's classified service history." Warren actually laughed under his breath. "Oh, this should be good." The judge extended his hand. When he saw the Pentagon seal, His entire expression shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough for every person in that courtroom to feel it. He broke the seal carefully. Read the first page, then the second. And suddenly, the room became very, very quiet. Judge Aldrich removed his glasses slowly. Then reread the second page again. The silence inside the courtroom felt unnatural now. Heavy. Dangerous. Warren shifted impatiently beside his attorney. Your Honor? No response. The judge kept reading. Finally, Daniel Cray stood. If there's an issue regarding admissibility, sit down. The words cracked through the courtroom like a rifle shot. Even Evelyn blinked. Judge Aldrich looked directly at me for the first time that day. Not suspiciously. Respectfully. Warren frowned. What the hell is this? The judge folded the documents carefully. Then he spoke in a voice so controlled it became terrifying. Mr. Holloway, he said quietly, you will remain silent unless addressed directly by this court. Something inside Warren visibly faltered. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked uncertain. Judge Aldrich inhaled once before continuing. These documents confirm Commander Savannah Vale served in multiple federally protected operations under Department of Defense authorization. Whispers exploded instantly. Oh my God. Classified. Federal operations? The judge raised one hand. Silence returned immediately. These records further establish commendations and operational distinctions this court itself does not possess clearance to fully review. Daniel Cray looked physically ill now. Warren just stared at me. Confused. Afraid. Like he'd suddenly realized he never actually knew who I became after leaving home. And, honestly, that realization hurt more than his hatred ever did. Because part of me had always hoped somewhere deep down, he cared enough to try. The judge continued carefully reading portions approved for civilian disclosure. Diplomatic extraction support. Emergency recovery coordination. Federal commendations under sealed authority. Every sentence landed heavier than the last. Meanwhile, memories flooded back violently. Desert heat. Gunfire echoing through embassy corridors. Carrying wounded civilians through smoke while helicopters circled overhead. Years of silence. Years of sacrifice. All reduced publicly to alleged accomplishments. Until now. Judge Aldrich finally lowered the papers. This court recognizes Commander Savannah Vale's military service as legitimate, verified, and federally protected. My throat tightened instantly, because another man with authority had finally forced Warren to face reality publicly. And he hated it. This is ridiculous. Warren snapped suddenly. I don't care what she did overseas. She's still not family. Evelyn stood immediately. Actually, Your Honor. She opened another folder. We're prepared to address that lie next. The room froze again. These county archive documents, Evelyn continued calmly, show that Warren Holloway himself legally acknowledged Savannah Vale as family 23 years ago during a financial liability proceeding. Warren's face lost color instantly. Cole whispered, Dad. Judge Aldrich reviewed the documents carefully, then looked furious. These filings directly contradict your current testimony. Warren swallowed hard. You don't understand. No, the judge interrupted sharply. You don't understand the seriousness of fraudulent testimony in federal adjacent proceedings. Then the courtroom doors opened. Two men entered wearing dark government suits. No badges visible. No expressions either. But every instinct inside me recognized them immediately. Federal. One handed documents quietly to the bailiff. The second briefly looked toward me and gave a subtle nod. Professional recognition. Nothing more. But Warren noticed. And panic finally appeared in his eyes. What is this? He demanded. Judge Aldrich reviewed the paperwork, then looked toward Warren slowly. Due to unauthorized attempts to access federally restricted records, he said carefully, a formal review has now been requested. Daniel Cray looked like he might faint, because suddenly this wasn't inheritance court anymore. This was federal territory. Cole stood halfway from his chair. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Warren snapped. But his voice sounded weak now. Old. And for the first time in my life, I realized something shocking. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. After the hearing adjourned temporarily, the The courtroom emptied into tense hallways buzzing with reporters and whispered speculation. I escaped near the vending machines trying to breathe. That's where Warren cornered me. Snow tapped softly against courthouse windows behind him. "You think you've won?" he asked quietly. I stared at him. "You dragged me into court. You humiliated this family." "No," I answered softly. "You did." His jaw tightened. "She poisoned you against me." The sentence stunned me. "She? Your mother?" Something inside me finally broke. Not violently. Cleanly. Like a chain snapping after years under pressure. "She loved you," I whispered.
"No," he snapped.
"She pitied me." And suddenly I understood everything. This was never really about money. Or inheritance. Or even me. Warren spent his entire life terrified of inadequacy. And my success forced him to confront it every day. He needed me smaller, so he could feel larger. Needed me dependent so he could feel powerful. "You know the saddest part?" I asked quietly. He frowned. "You still think this is about winning?" For once, he had no response. I stepped closer. "You lost me years ago." Those 4 words hit him harder than screaming ever could. Because they were true. The second half of the hearing destroyed what remained of his case completely. Bank records exposed Cole's gambling debts. Property records proved my mother funded most household expenses herself. Archive requests linked Warren directly to attempts at altering documentation. By the end, Judge Aldrich looked disgusted. "All claims are hereby suspended pending full review," he ruled sharply. Then he looked toward me. "Commander Vale." His voice softened slightly. "This court owes you an apology." That nearly shattered me emotionally. Because respect from strangers should never feel more healing than love from family. But sometimes, it does. Outside, reporters swarmed again. But this time the questions sounded different. "Commander Vale, were you wrongly accused? Did federal documents clear your record? Is your service classified?" Evelyn guided me toward a side exit before I answered anything. Inside the parking garage, one of the federal agents approached quietly. "You handled yourself professionally, Commander." "Thank you." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, people know what you did overseas." And somehow, that meant more than any medal ever had. 3 weeks later, the judge officially dismissed every claim Warren filed. Completely. The ruling included language so harsh local newspapers practically treated it like public humiliation. Fraudulent testimony. Intentional deception. Improper access attempts. Cole disappeared shortly afterward. Rumors said he fled to Florida avoiding debt collectors. Warren stayed in Ashridge alone. And something strange happened after the trial. People stopped protecting him. Turns out small towns admire proud men only until they publicly destroy their own daughters. Especially military daughters. I returned to my mother's house in early spring. The place smelled exactly like her. Lavender.
Coffee.
Old books. Sunlight drifted through windows while dust floated quietly through empty rooms. For the first time in months, the silence felt peaceful. Not lonely. Healing. While cleaning the attic one afternoon, I found a cedar box hidden beneath winter blankets. Inside were photographs, birthday cards, and letters addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. My hands shook opening the first one. "Savannah, if you're reading this, then I'm probably gone." And knowing Warren, things may already be difficult. I had to stop reading for a moment because tears instantly blurred the page. Then I continued. "Your stepfather was not always cruel. But somewhere along the way, disappointment became bitterness. And bitterness is a hungry thing. It consumes everyone nearby. But never confuse his inability to love properly with your worth. You were never difficult to love. Not once." I pressed the letter against my chest and cried harder than I had during the entire trial. Because after months of accusations, my mother finally brought me home to myself. That summer, I renovated the house instead of selling it. Not entirely. I kept her blue kitchen tiles, her garden, the old reading chair beside the fireplace. But I changed enough to make it mine too. Then I started something new. A scholarship fund for daughters from military families pursuing service careers. The first ceremony nearly destroyed me emotionally. Watching young women stand proudly in pressed uniforms while nervous mothers cried in folding chairs, I realized something important. Cycles end when someone finally refuses to continue them. Warren taught me survival. My mother taught me endurance. But I wanted to leave behind something better than pain. Then one October evening, he came to the house. I saw him standing near the porch through falling autumn leaves. Older now, smaller. The arrogance that dominated my childhood had collapsed inward into loneliness. When I opened the door, he looked past me into the house quietly. I heard about the scholarship. I nodded. Your mother would have liked it, he whispered. For the first time ever. He sounded sincere. And somehow that hurt most of all. I made mistakes, he finally said. I studied him carefully. The man who once terrified me no longer looked powerful. Just empty. And suddenly I understood something heartbreaking. People who destroy others usually destroy themselves first. My mother gave me this home, I said softly. You gave me every reason to survive. His eyes filled slightly. I think he came hoping forgiveness would reopen the relationship. But forgiveness and access are not the same thing. After a long silence, he nodded once, then walked slowly into the falling leaves. That was the last time I ever saw him. And honestly, that's okay. Because peace doesn't always come from reconciliation. Sometimes peace comes from finally realizing you no longer need the apology. And if this story reminded you of someone, or maybe reminded you of yourself, let me ask you something. Have you ever spent years trying to earn love from someone determined not to give it? If you made it this far, comment below. Peace over permission. And remember, sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is walk away without hatred. If stories about betrayal, survival, emotional strength, and powerful revenge speak to you, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.